Hey everyone, before we get into the video, I just want to remind you we are giving away a Nintendo Switch 2 right now. You can enter through the link down in the pinned comment or the description. The only requirement is to be subscribed to the channel. We'll be drawing the winner towards the end of summer. That being said, folks, today's video is going to be a little bit different. So we're going to go over some news. I definitely am going to put some news in here. We're not going to timestamp a lot of stuff up here because in the end, I want to have a bigger conversation about the state of the video game industry and how it's really just changing and evolving. And a lot of people are looking at these changes, looking at these evolutions. People have a hard time with change, and they're looking at this and projecting out that we are on the cusp, or maybe even in the midst of a video game crash. Now, I am not someone who was alive during the only video game crash that we're aware of in human history. And look, I was born after we were already out of it, and the Nintendo Entertainment System was out, and it was out before I was even born. If you go all the way out to Japan when it released in 1985, I was born in 1986. But also a lot of you gamers out there, even some that might be older than me, a lot of you guys probably were wee little lads that don't really have a lot of memories of what the era for video games was like before the video game crash. Now, setting all of that aside, obviously there's exceptions and there's people that remember all of this stuff. I'm just looking at the average age that seems to be of your average gamer. I think they said around mid-30s or so, which is right in my age bracket. So when you throw that out there, it becomes very obvious that, yeah, a majority of at least console and PC gamers don't seem to really have ever lived through a video game crash. That includes myself. So it makes it really interesting to talk about this in context with all the recent news as we have sale data updates and everything else. We're going to start first off by talking about why people are panicking. And it's quite interesting because we're a Nintendo channel, and I think this sometimes gives a different perspective because of the platform holders. Nintendo really literally just does things differently, and we're going to show that here in this video, and then just have this broader conversation because I do care about the whole industry, not just what's happening at Nintendo, even though what happens with Nintendo is what affects this channel the most, right? But I'm a gamer first and foremost, long before I'm a Nintendo YouTuber. So I care about the whole industry. So first, let's go look at the Circana data for last month. And this is really interesting because last month concludes a full calendar year of Nintendo Switch 2. So this US data is interesting because it gives us a full capture comparison between Switch 1 and Switch 2. So as we go here, we see May 2026 US video game market highlights, and we don't really care about the market growth, although we will note physical games saw growth for the first time in many, many years thanks to Switch 2, but that's neither here nor there. The actual financials are pretty healthy in the industry. That's the takeaway here. When you're looking at these numbers, you're talking billions and billions and billions every single month. That to me would state an industry that isn't exactly crashing, but hey, there are reasons and concerns within some of this data. So as we scroll down here, we're seeing, video game spending reach 4.2 billion, an increase of 3%. We're seeing obviously projected 10 best-selling games ranked on physical and full game digital dollar sales, and again, dollar sales, not unit sales. And again, Nintendo games aren't going to have any digital sales included. So when you see like Yoshi here debuting at number 8, that does not include any digital sales. And notably, Yoshi was cheaper digitally. So would it have been higher up the chart? Yeah, you would venture to guess so. But other games don't have digital data in front of them either. Like Crimson Desert doesn't. MLB The Show has some sort of stipulation with the double star. I have to look up what that is, but Subnautica 2 doesn't have digital sales, nor does 007 First Light. So just pointing out, it's not just Nintendo on these charts, that isn't it? So who knows where the hell things would have ranked if digital data was provided. Circana doesn't get digital data from some publishers, including Nintendo. All right, next up, they got the obviously top 10 ranked games. It's a full digital dollar sales. This is just digital sales. As we go down here, hardware. So hardware spending grew 38%. Again, this is going to be because of Switch 2, to $249 million. Nintendo Switch 2 offset a 43% drop in PlayStation 5 spending. And get this, a 58% dip in unit sales. Reminder, PlayStation 5 is more expensive today than a year ago. So that's why you're seeing the discrepancy in the revenue spending versus unit sales. The unit sales dip is astounding, nearly 60% year over year. That's despite the fact that people know GTA is on its way. Man, those price increases aren't helping things. Now, it's driven obviously by the recent price increases. Xbox Series hardware spending grew 7% versus a year ago, but unfortunately, unit sales fell by 12%. Now, that just goes to show the sales volume of Xbox is significantly lower than Nintendo and PlayStation 5. But obviously, they increased prices as well. So they actually saw a little bit of a revenue bump while selling less units. But that just goes to show that they're not really selling a high volume compared to Nintendo and Sony. Hence why Sony saw a revenue drop with a 58% unit drop. That suggests they're actually selling quite a few units still. All right. Now, Switch 2. It says Nintendo Switch 2 was again the best-selling hardware platform in both units and dollars for May and 2026 year-to-date, with PlayStation 5 being placed second across both measured time periods. The Switch 2 finished its first 12 months in the market at 5.9 million unit installed base. That makes it the second fastest selling video game hardware in U.S. tracked history, which began in 1995. Only the Game Boy Advance's 6.5 million units exceeds it. And people forget sometimes, because GBA only had 4 years on the market before DS came out, people forget that it sold 80 million in 4 years, 20 million a year. GBA was flying off shelves, a massive success story, which is what made the timing of the release of the DS so fascinating and weird. But then the DS obviously took off and became Nintendo's best-selling system ever until Switch. So obviously, at the time, what looked like this really weird thing, and I get that it wasn't supposed to replace the GBA, that was the original saying, but you look back at that and you go, damn, that is really, really fascinating how fast GBA was just flying, and yet Nintendo was so quick to get essentially a replacement out the door, regardless of Nintendo calling it one or not. It could literally play GBA games. So anyways, if we go back to the list here, you see, PlayStation hardware sales fell to the lowest May total since May of 2000. That's really the one that we're sticking here, combined obviously with Xbox raising prices again. So when you're seeing the lowest sales since May of 2000 for PlayStation, that is what is leading to some red flags right now, and people showing concerns. There were already red flags, of course, thanks to the rising prices. This is the first ever generation. That ninth generation, if you want to call Switch 2 10th generation, it doesn't really matter because I consider Switch to be a ninth generation console. Switch went up in price as well, right? Switch saw a price increase last year of $100 pretty much across the board with the OLED, the original, and the Lite. So Nintendo did a price increase last year. Now Sony and PlayStation have done multiple price increases on PlayStation and Xbox. So you can look at all of that. Obviously, Nintendo announced a price increase for Switch 2. It's already increased in Japan. It will be increasing in the US and most of the world on September 1st. So Nintendo also has a price increase coming, albeit a much smaller one than they even did on Switch 1, let alone obviously what the other companies have done. Nintendo really is seemingly trying to keep their hardware. Using the word affordable feels weird when we're talking about $500, but they're trying in an industry and an economy and a world of tech where nothing is cheap. Besides TVs, weird thing. TV prices are just still going down. Kind of a wild situation with TVs, being the one exception. Anyways, so as I sit back, Apple recently announced price increases as well coming for products. And obviously all these tech companies are seeing their profit margins hit. Nintendo saw a 10% profit margin hit, although they see a profit margin hit every launch of a new gen. This one was particularly harsher, but again, they were probably selling Switch 2 at a loss and probably still are selling Switch 2 at a loss. So this gets to the conversation about, well, if video game console sales are tanking, yes, people are still buying games. Matt Piscatella actually notes later in the thread that video game sales themselves, the actual games, is still healthy. There hasn't really been any massive decline in the consumer spending on games. It's the decline is hey, maybe people who own systems are buying more games, but less people are interested in buying new systems in 2026 due to pricing. This is quite interesting too, because obviously, the red flags popping up for PlayStation and Xbox are very obvious. But they're not so obvious with Nintendo, because when you talk about a video game crash, right? From what I understand, from what people who did live through the video game crash back in the day noted, it was the entire industry. It wasn't just like one system that crashed or one company's software that crashed. Everyone's software crashed and everyone's systems crashed. Nobody was doing well. That's what's really fascinating when we talk about this, because if there's an outlier, then it can't be an industry crash. And that outlier seems to be Nintendo so far. We'll see what the price increase does to it in September, but credit to Pierre485. He put together this accurate chart of the first 12 months of data in the US, just doing a like-for-like comparison. And you can see right now, after 12 months, Nintendo Switch 2 is ahead of Switch 1 by roughly 500,000 units. And, it's 493,000 to be exact. That is really, really interesting. It also shows Switch 2 is ahead of the Switch 1. Like, it was more successful in its first 12 months than Switch 1, despite the fact that many people, and look, I kind of lean this way as well, feel like the first year lineup for Switch 1 was better, at least in terms of first-party output and third-party exclusive output compared to Switch 2. But I will note Switch 2 had other advantages, such as the fact that it got significantly more AAA ports in its first year than Switch 1. So there was definitely some give and take with how the software lineups worked. But if you're one of those types, and there are many, many million, tens of millions that only buy Nintendo systems to play Nintendo games, I think a lot of people will probably prefer Switch 1's first year comparatively to Switch 2's. That being said, obviously some people might have preferred Switch 2's. It's really just about your cup of tea. Like, if you're really into things like Pokopia, you're really, really into things like Kirby Air Riders and stuff, like, hey, you know what? Maybe this lineup really did it for you. For me, I thought the Switch 2 first year lineup was really, really good. I'll just say this. I don't know about it being better than Switch 1. Switch 1's, to me, that 2017 to early 2018 was like the golden era. Like, I don't know that any platform has ever quite had a year like that for me personally, for my interest in what I want to play. But I do think Switch 2's first year was really, really good. And I talked about this on the Nintendo Byte podcast. Now, that's really interesting to look at those first year comparisons. But there's more indications that Nintendo is just different and indicating that they're not crashing. They're doing fine. Now, I want to be very clear. The reason that people think Nintendo isn't doing well really has nothing to do with their financial reports or their software sales. Some people might not like the lineup. Some people might be critical of the price increase, of course, which is understandable, or the $80 Fire Emblem or $80 Mario Kart World, right? We've seen all the drop the price crap out there. But what's really, really interesting, there's no indications from Nintendo's financials outside of that 10% profit margin drop, which, by the way, there's still 15% profit margin in the positive. Like, they're still doing really, really well. Nintendo has one thing that people point to say that they are in trouble. And that thing is the stock market. And look, this is obviously not the Japanese market. We're just going to look at the US one, although you can look at both and see they're pretty much the same. The valuation is just different. The currencies are different. And they're not one-to-one because they're different markets. But you can go look at the 1 year here, and you can see this big downward trend. Right? It's been going on almost for a year, more like 9 months. But still, September on forward, once that September direct happened in 2025, we know things have been heading downhill. Some of it because, investors being underwhelmed by the direct. Some of it just being, hey, news started coming out around the holidays about the DRAM stuff and the shortages and the RAM increases and memory increases. Like, things just started going nuts, and so it just kept going down and down. You'll actually see this with a lot of tech companies outside of the ones benefiting from the increases. All the ones that aren't benefiting from the increases, you have seen a decline, and you've seen huge declines throughout the entire stock market in Japan with their tech companies. So, there's other factors in play that people just don't know about because they don't live in Japan. That being said, what I find really interesting is that's pretty much it. That's like the lone fact-based data point that is undeniable and shows a company apparently not doing very well. Well, that's what you would think. But for a company not doing very well, they sure seem to be acting like they're healthy. Nintendo added 300 permanent jobs in the last fiscal year. Nintendo updates its employee data this week, right? They did it last night. It revealed it added over 300 permanent staff during the last fiscal year. Last year, Nintendo's headcount was 5,630. This time around, it's 5,938. Also, by the way, the average length of time that people spend at Nintendo working there has now increased to 14.6. Wouldn't be surprised to see that at 15 or higher in a year or two. The breakdown for male employees is 2,348 in Japan, 955 in North America, 671 in Europe, and 47 in Australia. Last year, it was 2,270 in Japan. So you can kind of see where the hires are happening at here. 880 in North America, 655 in Europe, and 50 in Australia. For women, the breakdown is 736 in Japan, 648 in North America, 480 in Europe, 53 in Australia. That's compared to 692 in Japan, 566 in North America, 468 in Europe, and 49 in Australia last year. And you can see some of the comparisons here. Another stat it says here is in the second set of data is for employee turnover rate. This is actually down almost entirely compared to last year. The only increase is in Japan, which is very small. Turnover rates are 2.3% in Japan, 4% in North America, 5.7% in Europe, and 16.2% in Australia. So again, Nintendo's employee retention rate's really, really high, industry best. Oh, and by the way, they are just adding more. They're not looking to get rid of people. They're adding more despite losing half of their company value in the stock market. Is that a company that seems like they're thinking we're in the middle of or about to start a video game crash? I don't know. There's more than that, though, and this story gets a little interesting. I'm going to go to one of my tweets because the story itself is needs an explanation. So you might have seen headlines about this 10% base salary increase that Furukawa brought up last night. He did bring it up. What's not clear is if it is a new 10% raise or if it is the one that happened in 2023. And the reason people say that is in 2023, they announced a 10% raise to all employees at the company. So we don't know because that percentage he mentioned last night is exactly the same as the percentage in 2023. We're not quite sure if that meant he's just referencing that they previously did a 10% increase or if he's talking about how they recently did a 10% increase. None of the translations of his words really provide any clarity on this. So the headline worthiness of it is a little up there outside of the fact that Furukawa did say it, and I guess you could speculate. But I did note that, hey, look, what's in a lot of their financials right now is they are building a near $1 billion building so they can hire even more people and expand their teams, which they've still been doing. And they raised everyone's salaries by 10%, whether that was in 2023, which isn't really that long ago, or if it's right now in 2026. Either way, they didn't lower their salaries, right? So that's really, really good. And again, Nintendo's built different, and when things look bleaker, they just commit more, very unique. And that's even true more so considering they're a Japanese company, and they've stayed with their primary stuff all hosted in Japan, despite the sinking value of the yen. You would figure there'd be a benefit to maybe move at that point, like Sony did, and move their headquarters out to California and base things out of the US, but that is not what Nintendo is going to do. They are a very traditional Japanese company. All right, so setting all of that aside, what is this grander conversation? Well, you will see videos out there. I think the most recent one I saw was today by Player Essence, saying that we're in a video game crash or we're about to be in a video game crash. And I didn't watch his video. In fact, I kind of stay away from a lot of these videos. I have seen a number of them over the years, and a lot of them are repeating the same rhetoric, which makes a lot of sense. You can look at this financial data from North America and just be like, whoa, the lowest PlayStation sales since May of 2000. That is insane. That is unheard of. This is a system that's about to cross 100 million units, and yet, is it going to cross 100 million units? I mean, people would venture so because of the GTA 6 coming out this holiday, but what if GTA 6 doesn't really boost PlayStation 5 sales? What if the people interested in GTA 6 already own PlayStation 5 or a modern Xbox? Food for thought, as we look towards it potentially being this huge system seller, and we assume it will be, but until we get there, we don't know, right? What we do know is that PlayStation did really, really bad. And what we do know is next month, the whole industry is going to be down. We know the Circana data for June is going to show a massive decline. And that is just because Switch 2 launched last year, right? It launched in June, sold like 1.6 million or something. So obviously there's going to be a huge decline in June. And then we'll see what happens. Obviously, I assume there'll be a decline in July. In fact, I expect there to be mostly declines for like the next few months. And then we'll see what happens when we get to the next big game release, which is probably going to be Ocarina of Time, or maybe Splatoon in Japan, but Ocarina of Time, I think, will be the one that really jives with the Western audience. But that's probably holiday, and the system will be more expensive then. So we still don't know if Nintendo's going to dominate this holiday. We still don't know if they're going to see declines. But even if Nintendo has a worse second holiday than they did first holiday, which is possible, I still don't know that I'd just buy this idea the video game industry is in a crash. And I say this because from everything I understand about the last video game industry crash, it was an entire industry. So it was console and software sales. But every indication in all these reports is that software sales are still as strong, if not stronger than they've ever been. So, and that's with games getting more expensive. That still it doesn't seem to be deterring the sales. So I feel like a lot of this idea that the video game industry is about to crash is more so just that the video game industry has evolved. It has changed. Some of it not due to any fault of itself, such as the RAM crisis out there, but other parts of it just been happening for a long time. Games have been getting more expensive. Forget the sticker price, microtransactions, DLC, day one DLC, cut content from day one to sell you deluxe versions with extra cosmetics. Hello, GTA 6. It's one of those things where, like, this is industry norm, which makes you feel like, yeah, you can get the game for a base price and never spend more, but that's because there's enough people still spending more to compensate for the people that aren't. The industry is charging more and has been for a while. Forget the $80 sticker price. The industry's just been charging more for a while. Now, obviously not everyone plays that game. Indie titles, Nintendo's been pretty consistent at just kind of keeping their games right around a similar price point. On Switch, it was $60. Obviously, they still had some $50 and $40 games, but their base price was $60 for pretty much every release besides Tears of the Kingdom, and obviously the handful that were a little bit cheaper. On Switch 2, the base price seems to be $70, except for the two exceptions that seem to be $80, although one is $80 only physically, $70 digitally, and then the other games they've had come out actually slightly cheaper, like the recent Star Fox, which is $60 for the physical and $50 for the digital. So we have seen Nintendo, have this price fluctuation and pricing games at different prices throughout the Switch generation and the Switch 2 generation. But yeah, we all know standard pricing, and Nintendo typically isn't cutting content to sell you DLC day one with deluxe editions, and they don't typically put microtransactions and all that kind of stuff in a vast majority of their games. I think Rusty's Real Deal Baseball, surprisingly, I think was like one of the few I can recall that had something like that. I'm sure there's other examples, but like it's few and far between compared to most companies. And that's because Nintendo just believes in a long-term vision and creating customer loyalty. I think that with the first generation ever of console prices going up, so watching the sales sink in year 6 of PlayStation and Xbox just has been a rough spot this whole way. It's almost worth not even having a conversation about them, although I'm not trying to insult people who love Xbox. I'm an Xbox player, an Xbox Series X in my bedroom that gets used every day. And I don't just mean for Netflix, like games are played on it every day. But yeah, it's just not the same, like Xbox fumbled so hard this generation. It's just not the same. They probably still sold like 36 million or so, but far cry from the Xbox One that was like 60 million, far cry from the 360. We're talking about numbers that are more in line with like the original Xbox. So I think that the industry is merely changed to where generations are just going to get longer. And I think that's really it. I'm going to be frank with you. I think generations are just going to be longer. I don't think there is a video game crash. I don't think there's anything really indicating there's a video game crash. In fact, in terms of unit sales over the last 6 years, more consoles have sold over the last 6 years than like entire generations combined. That to me does not indicate a crash. What it does indicate is that people are probably going to hold on to things longer. When PlayStation 6 and Xbox Helix come out, let's say they do launch next year, I suspect they're going to do well at launch, but I do suspect within a handful of months, you're going to see the sales slow down significantly just due to price point and the fact that every single game coming out on those platforms is still going to be on PlayStation 5. Meaning you don't have a reason to buy those more expensive platforms outside of just wanting better performance. But for the average consumer, if you got a console that can play it and play it at an acceptable way, why would you upgrade? Especially when it's going to be really expensive. It's one thing to be like, oh, it's just a little bit more expensive than the prior. It's going to be expensive, guys. Remember, PlayStation 5 launched at $500. You ain't seeing PS6 anywhere near $500 if it launches next year. So I do think that you're going to see this conversation pick up even harder after those systems launch and after we see the sales doing really, really bad, not just for Xbox. And I don't think PlayStation will do as bad as Xbox. To be clear, PlayStation 6 will probably end up okay. But I do think it could end up more so around the PlayStation 3 territory with sales than the PlayStation 4, right? Or the PlayStation 2. But that still wouldn't be a crash. That's still 80 million units. And Nintendo's still doing well. I think all that's going to happen is people are just going to hold on to their devices longer and keep buying games. It's not a crash. It's just an industry shift. It's an industry shift pushed by hardware shortages, pricing. That's not a crash. There's not a lack of desire for games. There's not a lack of desire to buy systems. But yeah, systems are pricing themselves out of the market. Most systems. Can't say all of them. Obviously, Switch 2, still selling well. PlayStation 6, or PlayStation 5, sorry, still selling. Maybe selling poorly, but still selling. Selling well enough. So I don't know, guys. I think there's a lot of doom and gloom. Maybe that's more so what I'm frustrated with out there. Just there's a lot of doom and gloom on the internet. Every day it's just more reasons to be negative. Meanwhile, the games come out. Look, Star Fox is a banger, right? More bangers are coming. But everyone just keeps like focusing the online conversation to like being concerned for the whole industry. And I think that concern is misplaced. I think people are worrying too much. I think having viable concerns over the direction of console pricing is absolutely a conversation that needs to happen and should continue to happen as things continue to get worse. But I don't think that conversation should lean into, oh my gosh, the video game industry is going to crash, when all the metrics out there show the software sales are as strong as they've ever been. And I think that's the metric you have to pay attention to. As long as people want to buy games, the industry is going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Yeah, you're going to see studio closures. You're going to see, staff layoffs. You're going to see IPs go dormant. But that's not because of us consumers. That's the thing. That's because of decisions we didn't make. And you might go, well, you didn't buy the game. We don't need 1,500 employees making a vast majority of AAA games and spending $200 to $400 million to make a game. That's the problem. That ain't a consumerism problem. That is running your company like shit problem. And it's catching up to all these companies now as, hey, guess what? 5 million in sales should be profitable for anyone to keep an IP going. Guess what? It's not when you have that many employees and that high of a budget. And too many companies obviously want all the profits. So a game can be profitable and they'll still shut down the studio. Whereas Nintendo has this mentality, hey, if the game's profitable, we're just going to keep making more. We don't really care if the profit is small or big. It all adds to the pot. But that's a mentality Nintendo has. It's not a mentality that a lot of these other platform holders have. So, yeah, I'm just going to say that I'm happy, man. I've been really happy as a gamer for a very long time, and I know I'm easy to please, but I think the primary reason that I'm so happy isn't just that I play Nintendo, because I think that sometimes plays a part, because when you're a big into Nintendo, you can feel kind of isolated from some of the industry drama. Yeah, we'll have our own isolated drama, like the drop the price stuff, but then you look back at that now a year after Switch 2 came out and how silly it feels like compared to like all the other bullshit going on in the industry, that like that was what people focused on. Are we maybe jealous of Nintendo's success a little bit because other companies are doing worse things? It's it's weird, but you know, we'll pretend Nintendo's this big evil company. We're not going to go back down that road. We've had that conversation before. None of these companies are our friends, and they all deserve criticism. It's just, you can criticize something, but then not just have to say it on repeat every single day for 365 days. As if it's going to make it. If it didn't make a difference the first 90 days, it's probably not making a difference the year later. Anyway, all right, guys. I'm going to let it go. Let me know what you guys think about the state of the industry, how Nintendo's doing. Do you think a crash is, we're in the middle of one, or one is coming? Am I wrong about all of this? Am I crazy? Is this video pointless? I don't fucking know. You guys let me know. Yes, I swore. I'm sorry to the children. Let me redo that quick for you. You know what? I don't know what's going on, but what I do know is I appreciate you being here. I'll catch you guys in the next video.